Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mind Split Cafe. This evening, we have Brittany Henderson here. She is an LCSW out of West Virginia.
Are you ready for this? Are you ready to have your mind split in this cafe?
As long as you've got some coffee, I'm ready. So my name is Brittany Henderson. I graduated from WVU. I have my social work degree. I have my bachelor's and master's, and like Chris says, I am licensed in the state of West Virginia. I follow after my dad. My dad's also a licensed mental health practitioner, and I've been in mental health my whole life. So it's a family business.
Brittany, I just have a bachelor's degree, and so I'm just the everyman, and I'm excited to be back. I had a great time these past episodes, and I'm looking forward to what Miss Henderson has to say on this subject.
This episode is going to be about substance abuse in general, not any particular substance, just kind of the brain disorder of substance abuse. And having said that, Brittany, I wanted to start off with kind of an analogy that I've learned or picked up over the past couple of years. So I've been under the impression, or I've learned that when you go to a substance abuse treatment center, whether it's inpatient or outpatient, or just a clinician such as yourself, a lot of these clinicians kind of leave the door open for failure before they even get started by kind of telling them that they're an addict. They're going to be an addict their whole life. You're different than everyone else. You're never going to be the same. And the analogy that I use is a cucumber. Once it's turned into a pickle, it can never be turned back into a cucumber again. And that's essentially what they're telling these patients is you're not a normal human anymore. You're an addict. You're going to struggle the rest of your life, and you're never going to be the same. So I feel like that kind of leaves the door open for failure before they even get started. What do you think about that?
It's really about setting up a person for being able to have a new life. I understand why they feel it's so important because it's setting the groundwork for individuals to realize that they can't get comfortable going back to old ways. They can't get comfortable going back to kind of the old lifestyle, but needing to remove themselves from the lifestyle they were in, the people, the habits, the whatever it was that led them up into that point. And I think that's the big reason why they kind of say that. And the cucumber analogy, it can never go back. I think that's why it is, because it is forever changed. The person is forever changed. The experience of addiction does forever change a person. But I don't disagree with you in that I do think the way it's presented can tend to set up a lot of individuals for failure by being like, once an addict, always an addict, telling someone you're an addict, it's all you're ever going to be is an addict, and you need to keep that in your mind forever. Well, yes, but in the sense of someone needs to keep that in their mind as just kind of like a tiny little red flag that they just kind of have in the back of their head. You have your life, and your life is going, and you've got all of these great green flags, and everything's going great and everything's going happy, but then things will get stressful, and you've got these yellow flags, the stressors. So sometimes things might get a little more intense, and as yellow flags pop up, anyone that has a history of any kind of substance abuse, they need to know their the tricks. So the toolbox that they learned in whatever program they went through, whether that is reaching out to their buddy, calling their support person, maybe talking to their therapist more than once a week or more than once a month, whatever the tools are that they learned how to keep whatever it was that they, that hurdle they got over in check. They need to start implementing those tools more as the yellow flags start popping up more than the green, because the goal is to get everything back into green. And we all go through stressful times of yellow where that yellow comes in. But once you start getting red flags incorporated into that green and yellow mix, that's where they really need to hunker down and start putting all of those tools in. So that is why the once an addict, always an addict analogy is always put into place. It's not for shaming purposes, although I do think people are very much so shamed. But I believe that that narrative is changing, and it's not so much of a shame as a, hey, I need this help, and I need to have these supports in place.
So going back, I know you kind of you went over a lot there, and we'll touch base on a lot of it. But I wanted to ask a question about complacency. Kind of seems like complacency is where you kind of start getting into trouble. You stop doing your program, whatever it may be, whether it's 12 step or smart or whatever the case is. Being complacent starts moving into the yellow flags, right?
Right. Well, and the yellow flags I just kind of meant by way of just life in general. We all have those stressors, whether you have any sort of mental health diagnoses or not. We all have those yellow flags, but some people will turn to soda, some people will turn to sugar.
Would you consider like something like fructose? People crave this processed sugar. Would both of you consider maybe that being a substance that does get abused, or people can get, hooked on and revert to when they're feeling those yellow stressors like you mentioned, Brittany?
Absolutely. I'm going to say about 95% of Americans are probably addicted to sugar in one form or fashion. It is in everything that we
I'm a
eat. And
sucker for Dr. Pepper, so that's just my thing. So
the research is there to prove it. It's added into a lot of things that it really shouldn't be in, and that's a whole nother story. But if you look at the brain scan of somebody after they've just had sugar and the brain scan of somebody after they've had their illicit substance, they're not too different.
wow.
Those the same pleasure sensors in the brain light up, right? But you can also have like, have you ever heard of exercise bulimia? And that's when someone will exercise to get the same kind of high they do from sugar or an illicit substance, so to speak. So it's just about using something not healthy. And we when I say not healthy, we know that alcohol has adverse effects, and in cocaine, all of those drugs have.
Yeah.
Don't do them. They're not good for your body. But exercising can be bad for your body as well if you do it in an excess.
So going back to the analogy, and a clinician tells you you're going to be different the rest of your life, it's going to be a struggle. Neuroplasticity. That's a huge thing in the way the brain evolves and changes, and it's ever changing and ever evolving. So does that kind of contradict what they're saying? Is saying you're going to be an addict the rest of your life, but yet the brain can change and morph into something different?
I can see how it would sound like that. And it may, at this point, it doesn't, just because one, those areas of the brain may not be the brain that are changing at that point. But two, even if they are, it may not be the brain that is the area that is having the craving. So if we look at pregnant mothers, um, pregnant mothers' bodies will crave certain things.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the body will pull it from wherever they can, for whatever reason they can, however they can. Whether that's, calcium from their teeth, calcium from their bones. And, granted, it's for the baby, but it's not the brain doing it. The brain's just sending the signal. It's the computer board, but it's not the thing doing it. So I think of that in the same way that the body physically could be having the craving
Mhm.
for whatever substance it is. It needs whatever compound X, Y, and Z, and the brain's just sheerly sending the signal. So I haven't seen research one way or the other. It'll be really interesting. And I love that we're learning that our brain is constantly developing to be able to protect us and help us move past things. I mean, it's amazing what, TBI individuals with TBI are able to do after but so long.
That was a great response. That kind of opened up a whole new set of doors for questions for me.
Yeah, she's got to come back for another episode.
Yeah, no
This is
kidding.
amazing stuff already. We're only 10 minutes in. Like, geez.
Brittany, another thing I wanted to ask, being a mental health clinician, there are several different therapy techniques that are utilized, whether it's substance abuse or anxiety, depression. But I know some of the most common ones used in substance abuse is motivational interviewing, um, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and DBT for people that have other personality disorders or have trouble containing their emotions or dealing with their emotions. What do you find to be the most effective? And that might be a hard question to answer because everyone's going to be different and each therapy is kind of tailored to the personality. But what do you find to be most widely used in substance abuse?
In my experience, cognitive behavioral therapy has been what I have used most across just all patients, but it definitely gets tailored as we go, and different pieces of different therapy types, can be kind of thrown in here and there. I love it just because you just get to sit down and have a conversation. And the more comfortable someone feels, the more they tell you. And the more they tell you, the more you can uncover, the more you can pick apart. I mean, this is probably one of the most overused analogies in mental health, but it's the onion, you're just poop, 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 poop. You just
Pulling
keep
the
getting
layers
to
back.
pull back the layers. You get to help them remove what parts aren't serving them anymore. Or it might not be totally, bad, but oh no, it's underdeveloped. So how about we move that over here and grow it some more? And more often than not, it's a piece that's underdeveloped due to trauma.
So mere exposure. I know that's not very widely talked about. It was, a social experiment done back in the day, and it's used as a therapy technique. And I think that one of these is kind of iffy or questionable because the basis of it is if you're an alcoholic, they don't want you to walk into a bar because you're going to be surrounded by your triggers. Mere exposure is where you slowly introduce the bar into this person's life again. I find that to be a slippery slope. What do you think about that?
I agree, because it may not have been the same bar that they had been in ever before. Somebody could have been and may have had their whole entire life in Texas, and they decide, they get this great opportunity and they move to West Virginia. And oh, it's great, it's cool. I can go into this bar. I don't have any memories associated with it. But humans are creatures of habit. We love comfort. We want everything to be nice, cozy, as comfortable as possible, right? So they're going to order the go-to drink that they know. Or maybe, it wasn't liquor, but it was beer. They all taste generally the same. It's that thing. Or the smell. Oh, sorry, not that they would drink, but the soda that's there. And the smells of bars are the same. The music, the ambiance, the atmosphere, it all can trigger memories. Memories trigger smells, they trigger all kinds of things. And so it's very, very rocky ground, and you definitely leave it up to the patient, but it's not ever something that I like to recommend.
Let me ask
Yeah.
you, and something that you just said, right? It triggers a memory, right?
Mm.
But is it so much that it triggers a memory that the person acts on it, or is it triggers a feeling of emotion that person acts on? Because I mean, obviously, just speaking personally, I've had plenty of memories. I'm 40 something years old and I've got memories that, whatever, but I've never acted on a memory. I've mainly acted on an emotion or something, how it made me feel. So then I was in the bar and it made me feel good. So I had a drink or,
No, you're
whatever.
right.
You know what I'm saying? So is it so much the memory itself or it triggers that feeling and it's like, okay, I want that same feeling again. So they act upon it.
No, you're absolutely right. The memory brings about the feeling of like, oh, that was fun to do this, or I had such
Hmm.
a great time with that. The warm and fuzzies of
Yeah.
whatever that memory had associated with it, and you want to recreate those warm and fuzzies, and then therefore, well, what did I do in those moments that recreates that gives
Hmm.
me that feeling? So you're right, absolutely.
I'm done. I'm quitting right now. This is it.
That's
This is my last episode, guys. Thank you. Brittany said, "Yeah, you were right. I'm out." You know.
Drop the mic, call it a night.
Yeah, I'm Matt Palmquist, THEMAN. Those are my certifications, the man. So there you go.
Oh, well, I'm not done. I got another question for you. Can you walk the listeners through the steps of recovery? I mean, what from detox all the way to getting through it and coming out on the other side?
The 12 steps are like acceptance, hope, faith, courage, honesty, patience, humility, willingness, brotherly love, integrity, self-discipline, and service.
Well, I was just going to say the first one is admitting you have a problem, and that's probably the hardest step for
Yeah.
someone to take, is admitting you have a problem and that you're powerless over it and you alone cannot get out of it. You need help, whether it's medical intervention or your higher powers, such as what the 12 steps preaches.
People, have their drinks every night or, whatnot. The functioning part, anybody who that functioning alcoholic part is the really dangerous part, because when you have people that, get DUIs or are kind of stumbling or are constantly, consistently, regularly intoxicated, um, everybody's pushing them to get help, right? But when there's that functioning alcoholic, I've known a few, um, that's where people are like, oh, no, they hold a job, they pay their bills, they take care of their family, but doesn't mean that they don't need help,
Yeah.
you know? And there's a huge piece with acceptance there by families, friends, and the individual.
Yeah, I heard the people that need the help the most are the quiet ones, the ones that don't ask for help because they don't know how to ask for help.
I think a lot of it in mental health and addiction is stigma. And then, at some point, that person had to be strong and they asked for help and they got turned down. And so they said, okay, fine. I will never ask for help again.
Hmm.
I could see that definitely being the case.
There's definitely a fear factor to it where it's like I admitted to
Absolutely.
myself that I needed help, and then I reached out and I couldn't find it, or I was denied, whatever the case may be. They might feel that hopelessness. I've got a story about AA, and I
Okay.
want to share this because my grandma was 50 years. When I was growing up, we'd go visit her in Houston, and she used to take me to meetings. And I was like 7 or 8, and I didn't know what a meeting was. I thought my grandma was important, and I thought, she's important enough to where she can bring her grandkid into the meeting, and no one's ever going to say anything because she's a boss, right? Well, later found out that obviously she took me to AA meetings. Like,
Yeah.
going admitting to yourself that you have an issue with alcohol, I'm sure it's a huge step, right? But to be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm proud enough to know this is who I am, and I need these meetings to help me. But I want to take my grandson because I love him and I want to spend time with him. And I'm not ashamed of who I am because this is part of me, And so, yeah, I cherish that about my grandma a
That's
lot.
so
Not that she
sweet.
would go to AA, but just the fact that she loved me enough to share those intimate kind of, and I don't remember what the meetings, I don't remember what they were saying. I was off playing with Hot Wheels, right? But
And
just the
donuts.
fact that, we were spending time together was amazing.
Well, it looks like we are coming up on our time slot here. I could go all day long about this. I have a soft spot for substance abuse. I've had it in my family, so I've dealt with it before on the personal side. I love to hear about it on the clinical side of it. So I appreciate you coming out with us, taking the time to speak to us. We'd love to have you on sometime in the future and kind of further discuss it a little bit more, get a little more granular with it.
course. It was great to be invited. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, before Chris departs, we got to pay some bills. Shout out to Health Prep Meals, TexAid Mortgage, and the Shack with several locations in the RGV for your convenience. So thanks for another great episode, Chris. Thank you, Brittany. Chris, I'll let you take the stage from here, but guys, we'll see you next week and looking forward to another great conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Matt. And, as always, thank you for being my sidekick on this. And, I know the first one you ran it for me, and I appreciate it because you do this for a living. And thank you for showing me how to do it. I couldn't be doing it without you, man. So I'm glad you're here.
No
I'm glad
problem.
you're attached to my hip at this project. Brittany, again, thank you for showing up and doing this with us. I know Brittany on a personal level. So I'm excited that she was on here. I'm just glad you made it out, Brittany. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And catch us every Wednesday. We drop the episode at 1 p.m. Eastern time every Wednesday. So check us out on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. We're on pretty much all the platforms. Check out our website as well. We're going to have some useful information. We're actually going to be putting up the information that Brittany sent us. So take a look for that. Thank you, guys.
Take care, guys.